Alright, let's get into cutting this fitting out then. You just seen me in the previous video fabricating all these lines with the design and layout part of the procedure. Now we're going to cut it out to get our cheek, our left and our right hand cheek laid out for the 45-degree change elbow, 10-inch and 8-inch leading sides. We'll have to do some fabrication with the tin snips, but we're going to start by cutting the big portion of it off on the shear. So let's go on over to that now. Okay, up here on the shear, first thing I'm doing, I'm just going to square this sheet up with the edge of the part. There's a point up here that we need, so that's what we're going to save, and then finish just kind of taking the bulk of the material off from that point on. So I'll slip it in there, find the edge of the mark, make sure I don't cut the sheet anything too short. Get them both that far. Looks like we're up in here. Slide it through so it's not short. Okay, so we're ready to go on that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this 45-degree angle off here. So that's basically as straight as it can be. If I can find it here, right there. So just lining it up with the edge of the shear there. Here we got that one. We can also do the back side here. And that'll cover the majority of the part. If we get most of that cut off there. Okay, now that I've got them sheared out, we're going to run these over and finish with our tin snips cutting the radius. Okay, back over here at the workbench, I'm ready to go with my tin snips. We're going to cut these out and finalize this project. So okay, there we have it. We got the left hand piece and the right hand piece for our 45-degree 10-inch to 8-inch change elbow. They should be a match, an identical match when you put them together, and it is. So now we're up to the notching portion of the project. So remember, we're going to notch with the airflow for the cheeks here. So using our 3/4 inch notcher per the plan, we're going to take these corners out of here and get this fit and ready to go for the easy edging procedure. Notice I'm doing both of them, the left and the right piece, identically at the exact same time, making that mirror image of one another. Okay, and then with your tin snips, we're just going to cut them back and set a little bit of a relief angle on them, making certain they're nice and smooth in them corners with no extra areas for them to catch. Do the same on this one, on part B. Still with two identical parts here, 10" to 8" leaving, all the marks on the inside on both of those. And then we're going to be ready to run it through our easy edger here. So just like the previous projects, we're going to bend this to the 90° to start and run it through our edger. So you can see I've got to tighten this corner up a little bit yet here, right at the tip, and same down here. So the second time through, we should be able to get that. Just going to follow the scribe mark that we put on there with our dividers prior to doing this. Okay. That one's pretty well ready. Now let's do the inside the throat. And we're going to work that on through. Looks like I could tighten that outside edge up just a little bit further yet. That doesn't look too bad. And we'll tighten the centers up also. See how they match up. Looks like our radiuses are pretty decent. To calculate out our stretch out lengths for the throat and the heel. The throat's not too big of a deal, it's 45° angle, but the heel portion there's a little bit more math in that because our pivot points, the location of that we got to figure in with some of that. So let's start with the throat first. We got a 45° angle, so from the previous formulas we're going to take pi divided by 4, and that's going to come up with the multiplier for the 45° angle, and then we're going to multiply that by our 4" radius on the plan there, so times that by 4, and then add the inch for the additional straight sections there, plus 1 inch, and we're looking at about 4.14 inches. So let's verify that with a wire or something here. Let me pull the tape measure out. We'll go to the nearest 12-inch mark. So I'm going to just roll this thing around. I'm going to measure it to the outside where the sheet metal would be sitting there. We're going to set it there, and 4.14 is not an even decimal, so we're 4.125 is 4 1/8. So let's see how this comes out. And right there, you can't probably see that on the wire there, but where it says T stamped on there, and I come up with 4 1/8 inches. So that works out for the stretch out length of that throat. Now let's find the stretch out length for this heel. So I'm just going to write that on here, 4 1/8. 4 1/8 inches. Just from here all the way down. The heel's a little bit different because we've got a straight section here that's quite large to make the change elbow, and then to top that all off, our pivot point has been moved to 0.7 when we made this arc over here. So we got to take that into account also. We got to find the radius of our pivot point down. It's still at a 45° angle, everything that's going to work out, but we got to figure out what our dimension is. So with my tape measure, I'm just going to simply measure it from the back to my pivot point. It looks like I'm about 7 1/8 long here, 7 1/8 inches long to my pivot point. And then there's a 1/2 inch down here, straight section, And then we got to figure out what this straight section is, so I'm going to measure that one to determine this all. And I'm looking at about 5 1/4 inches. 5 1/4 to my 0.6 there. 5 1/4 inches with that. So I got 5 1/4 straight there. I got a 1/2 inch down here. That's straight. And that should take care of everything with that. Okay, so in order to calculate this, we're going to go back to our calculator again here. And 45-degree angle is pi divided by 4, my multiplier, and then I'm going to multiply it by my radius of 7 1/8. 7.125 is the decimal equivalent. Let's try that again. Pi divided by 4 times 7.125 gives me 5.59, the stretch out length from just 0.4 up to 0.6. Now we got to add a 1/2 inch for the bottom, so plus 0.5 onto that, and then we got to add this straight section up here of 5 1/4, so an additional plus 5.25, and I come up with 11.34. Let's see, 11.375 is 3/8. So let's see if I can verify that. Let's try this again. 11.375. Let's see if we can come up to something close with that. This time I'm going to measure it to the outside of the plate again, just like I did over here on the other opposite external side, because again that's where the metal is going to lay when we go to placing that. So right there, looking at about for 11 3/8, and it lands right there on the E lettering of the wire. I don't know if you can see that. So let's see. 11 3/4. I think I slid that. Let's try that again. Work that around there. And the stretch out length comes to about 11 5/8 is what I've got there. So let me write that down. 11 5/8 inch stretch out length on the part. Let's try and calculate that one more time. Maybe I made a mistake. Make sure I measured right. About 7 1/8. Yep. 5 from there I got 4 3/4 plus the additional 1/2 is 5 1/4. That should work out. 5 1/4 and a 1/2 inch down here. That's good. One more time. So pi divided by 4 times my radius of 7 1/8. 7 1/8. 5.59 for just this section, plus the 5 1/4 up here, plus a 1/2 inch down here. 11.34. Yep, doesn't come out to a standard decimal. Yep, 11.34. Well, 0.5 is that. So 11 5/8 is over. It didn't come out the way we wanted it to, did it? On that. So let me just measure it one more time. Yep, let me get this stretched out. Make sure the wire doesn't slide on me. when I go to putting this thing in here. Right there. $11 5/8 is what I'm going to go with. So for that one, I am going to ignore the calculator. Maybe it's got something to do with my dimension or how I measured it here, why it's not coming out. So it's always good to verify your lengths by pulling a string or pulling the wire along there so it works out for you. Okay, so now that I got my dimensions, we're going to go ahead and make the throat. So let's go to the next two sets of plans here on the sheet. Set this one aside for a little bit. And here we're looking at the throat, which is a rolled throat. And here, if we turn it to the side, is the heel where there's a rolled portion, which would be this portion here. And then there's a straight or a flat portion over here on that side. So we got to figure out what we need for our width of our part, and we'll go from there. So if you notice here, the plan says the finished dimension overall is going to be an 8 inches, 8-inch duct there, and then we've got a 7/8 take up on each side for a lock form. Again, most lock forms are set to 1 inch. Ours is a little bit different here in the lab setting. Same with the back side. We've got an 8-inch finished ductwork and a 7/8 take up for our lock form, most being 1 inch. Okay, moving on. So what we're looking at is 8 plus 7/8 and 7/8 is 9 3/4 by some length that we've already measured for both of these. Again, this one here with the 4 1/8 is going to be too short by itself to go through our lock form machine, so we're going to attach this section on to this one, and then we'll cut them loose after we've completed that setup. Okay, so I've got my piece cut at 9 3/4. That's ready to go by a random length. This is just a 36-inch sheet that was cut off there for our dimension. Yep, and that's ready for us. Now we just got to lay out all of our marks that we need there. Let's do it this way. This is fine. So first things first, we're going to look at our 4 1/8 inch dimension on there and pull those numbers. So let's put a mark here, 4 1/8. Right there. And we'll square that across there. It's almost too short. Okay, that's going to be this section of the fitting. These 1/2 inch marks are not, nothing really to worry about. We're looking for the final distance from here to here, 4 1/8 inches. This is going to be taken into account later on when we bend our drive cleats on those for this project. So what is important though is the 7/8 sides. So we'll do that with the scribe. We'll find our 7/8 or your inch for your lock form, whatever you have, and then we'll run them down till we find our dimension. Flip it over there and do the same on the other side. The next thing then for us to do with our plans here is we want to figure out our remaining distance here. We measured 11 5/8, an additional onto our mark. So let's go ahead and mark that next. So with my scribe, I'm going to set it at 12 and use the red numbers here. 11 5/8 for you is what I calculated this out. 11 5/8 right there. And we're going to also square that one all the way across the sheet. Okay, at this point in time, this section here with the the heel and the throat connected together, that would be long enough. So we can cut that off and use the remaining section of the part down here for another fitting later on. Up to this point, this is what we're basically looking at before I go and cut anything off there. Next thing I want to do is I want to get my notches on the ends of each of these, but we're going to have to get it cut off before we finalize them, so let's do that now. Let's take it over to this shear. Okay, here we are at our square inch shear then, and we're going to cut that off right on the mark that we just put on here. Okay, so this is the extra part. We can let that there for later, and this is going to be our new throat and heel. Back at the table now, we've got our part cut to the length with the throat portion as well as the heel laid out in here. So let's start with our notching portion of the procedure. So from the ends, we're just going to cut out the sections that are accessible, 2 on that side, and then we'll cut out, so that was on that half of that piece. Now we're going to cut out this half of this chunk over here. Now that I got those cut out there, I've got to cut out my center section where these two meet. I can't do that with the notcher. I'm going to have to do that with the tin snips. So just using the templates, I'm going to make my marks just as if they were in there, as I individually would cut them out on the regular sheet. Do the same over here on this other side. And then with my tin snips, we're going to cut them out. There's one, and we'll get the second one now as well. Those are done. Now we just got to knock off these corners so they're set out of there also. That one's got a tail. I don't know if you can see that, but if I let that tail right there in the camera there, that would be an edge to catch your finger on. So we'll cut that back just a little bit further yet and get rid of that. Okay, at this point in time, I've got my throat section here attached to my heel section down here, and they're ready to be run through the lock form machine. Everything's ready to be gone through. When I get done with that, I should come up with 8 inches in between them, which I've got, and this fitting should fit just fine. So let's run it through the lock form now. So in the shop, we've got 2 different lock form machines. This is the one I've been using for the most part for a good portion of these projects. Today I'm going to just switch to this one just to show you that it's a very, very similar machine. Still got the 8-inch minimum, 7/8 take-up set up here, but this does on the top have a an edging machine for doing the easy edging on top of that as well. That's not a feature we're going to use today. We're just going to use the standard lock form. So with that, let's show you how to run through this one. Lining up my edges again, and just keep it tight against the fence. Spin it around. then I've got the lock form set up for both sides, the throat and the heel. So let's cut them loose now that they're through the machine. So we'll spin around over here onto our shear, looking inside there, lining up our mark where it belongs, and we'll cut them off. Okay, now that I'm back here at the bench with these two parts, I'm going to look at my sections here, and I notice that I've got to have a straight section with no roll on this. So I'm just going to put a small mark here about where that belongs without any roll on it, and this is going to be the rolled section, and this is flat. For the plan, it's, I guess, like this, rolled and flat over here. Okay, and this one here is also going to be a roll, but this one's going to be an opposite side, roll to the X side. So this will be down, this one will have to be up. So let's go on over to our roller next and take an example along so we got something to monitor it based on. Okay, here we are at our roller. We're gonna determine which direction this has to be rolled, which for this particular throat it has to be rolled with the lines down so we got the same curvature of the part. So let's stick it in there. If you need to loosen the rolls up, you can release the handles, raise your lifting bar, and then relock it as well. So with that, it appears that we need to tighten them up some. So on the back, we're just going to again tighten these up equally, maybe a turn or two on each one, and run that through again. And then tighten it again, a couple turns on each side equally. Continue that roll. So we're starting to get our curvature. Looks like it could go a little bit further yet. And that appears to be pretty close on the sample or the example of our part there. The next thing we got to do is we got to roll the heel section. So again, we're going to determine which it's going to be. So there's our flat side, and we got to roll that up just to the line. That's why I put that on there prior to this. So I'm going to release it, put it in our unit here. But this time, rather than rolling it all the way through, we're going to stop when it hits the red line. And I've overbent it. So we're going to open it back up, and that's a good thing because this one I also made a mistake and forgot to put my spacers in the lock forms. So it can be done without, it's not too big of a deal, it's just it's a little bit tighter inside here. So when I stretch them back open, that should help with the assembly part of this project. So this one's small, so we can just hand form it. Open them back up until it matches. That's not too bad. We'll be able to make that work on the part there. Also, when we pull it out there, you can see it fits pretty good on there. So, all right. That is going to wrap up the throat fabrication and the heel fabrication for the 45 degree change elbow with the 8-inch leaving side and the 10-inch air entering side on that. So thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one for assembly.